August 22nd, 2005, item number 78. Today's guest is Pete from RasterWeb Radio.
Podcast411.com. Listen different.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Rob, and this is the Podcast 411 Podcast. Before we get into the interview with Pete, a couple quick news and notes. On the last podcast, I mentioned that I sat down next to someone who already knew what podcasting was. What I would be interested in hearing is from you out there, any stories you might have about trying to explain podcasting to friends, relatives, or strangers. You can leave audio comments on our voicemail line, which is 206-666-HELP, H-E-L-P. Or you can send those comments to podcast411@gmail.com. I'd love to hear them and put a few of them on the show, let other people hear some funny or humorous or sad stories about trying to explain podcasting. Well, we're going to go ahead and play the tech tip from Michael Carino that should have been on Saturday's podcast, but because of an issue between the chair and the keyboard here at Podcast 411, it didn't make it in on Saturday's show. So here's Michael with this week's tech tip.
Hello, this is Michael Carino from the Digital Media Cast Experiment with another Podcast 411 Tech Tip. Podcasters have been plagued with the fact that music one would buy from a store or hear on the radio cannot be used on their programs. The problem starts with the fact that musicians like to get paid for making music, or more accurately, the record companies and corporate types demand their cut of the music played, and then they give a little bit to the artists. With the advent of podcasters and independent artists, those artists who market their music without the aid of a record company, came a great tool for artistic production and distribution: the PodSafe Music Network. The creators of the PodSafe Music Network realized that a symbiotic relationship between podcasters and independent musicians would not only be a good thing, but also productive. Podcasters need music for the production of their programs. Independent musicians, while not being the indentured servants of the record companies, don't get the benefit of those corporate publicity machines. The PodSafe Music Network nicely supplies each with their needs in a symbiotic and cooperative manner. Podcasters, getting the music for your program is easy. Here's how to do it. First, go to music.podshow.com and click on the link that says Podcasters Register. Next, fill in the form and wait for an email confirmation. Now, the form seems a little bit intrusive, but after reviewing it, I found it reasonable. Furthermore, the PodSafe Music Network programmers didn't seem to leak out your personal information to other podcasters, the bands, or the public. After that, look for music and add it to your playlist. From your playlist, you can download the music for use in your podcasts. Once you've played a music cut in your podcast, return to the playlist to report when you played that specific cut. It's quite easy. Lastly, mention that your show contains music from the PodSafe Music Network, something like this. Music from this program was performed by the reverse engineers and provided via the PodSafe Music Network. It's that easy. So sign up. Thanks, Rob, for letting me share a little of the 411 on the PMN.
Michael, thanks for the tech tip. Greatly appreciated as always. And you can check out Michael's podcast in our show notes. We will have a link to his site. Today's guest is Pete from RasterWeb Radio. Now, many of you have probably never heard of Pete. Matter of fact, I had not heard of Pete until he was brought to my attention by Drew from Dawn and Drew. See, Pete is the one that introduced Drew to podcasting. Pete is truly a visionary when it comes to podcasting. He was one of the very first podcasters. He's been podcasting over a year. That's correct, over a year. He started podcasting in early August 2004. He's had a blog since 1997. That tells you a lot right there in itself. And he actually wrote some scripting to create an aggregator in early 2004 to download IT conversations. But Pete has not been a promoter, and as you'll hear in this interview why, of himself in the podcasting genre. When I found out more about Pete, really wanted to get him on the show because you don't often get a chance to talk to people that had the foresight to see what was going to happen in podcasting. And if you go back and listen to Pete's old podcast from a year ago, you'll see he did hit the nail right on the head when it came to podcasting and what was going to become of it. So we're going to go ahead right now and get into the interview with Pete. Here we go. Well, Pete, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And I always start out with a traditional first question, and that is, what was your first computer?
Mine, well, I guess, mine would be the one my brother got, which was an Apple II Plus. We either got it in 1979 or 1980. Don't remember the exact year. well, basically, we learned BASIC on it. And, we hooked up the tape recorder. You had to press play and then type load very quickly, and it would load your programs. And you had to type save and then hit record very quickly on the external tape recorder to save them. Eventually got, the 5.25 floppy disk drive from Apple. That was very nice. That's my early experiences. Basically, just writing basic programs, doing low-res and high-res graphics. And that's kind of where it all started, I guess.
I always like to ask people what was the first podcast they listened to, but when you were listening back in early August of 2004, they weren't a podcast. So what was the first audio blog you listened to?
Yeah, I mean, the word didn't exist. Actually, years ago, probably in 2000, I think Greasy Skillet, I want to say a guy named Dave, maybe down in Chicago, was doing some of that, what was called audio blogging, I guess, at the time. And I kind of, lost track of that, but then I got into, the stuff that Christopher Lydon was doing, with Dave Weiner, the interviews he was doing. I think that was kind of the first, RSS with enclosure stuff I'd gotten into. I think at that time it was just, downloading them directly. I had tried to get, the Lug Radio guys. I think they had tried doing an RSS2 feed with enclosures, and it was it would either break or be not available. So I remember bugging him about it, trying to get him to fix it. I remember emailing Doug Kay at IT Conversation as well early on and saying Doug, you've got some problems with your feed, it's not validating, stuff like that. Although I didn't really care because it's they didn't validate, so I just write some Perl code to just rip through it in regular expressions and download the files. So like I said, I think it was early 2004 that I had written some code which would kind of be called an iPod, or as they're called today, which grabbed the IT Conversations feed and then just downloaded the MP3 files. So that was my early contribution or whatever, I guess.
Right. You had your own program, Renko.
Yeah.
And are you still using it?
No, I mean, basically that was I think in February of 2004. That was basically the code I had written specifically just for IT Conversations to grab all that stuff, because that's what I was listening to at the time. And I kind of cleaned it up and made it a little more general, added some documentation, renamed it to Renko. It was called IT Conversations, .pl. So I kind of renamed it, gave it a name, officially released it, because I saw what, Adam was doing. And I actually never even looked at Adam's code or ran it. I just, I had the same idea for my code, and I was already running mine, so I just kind of cleaned it up and released it.
Are you still listening to podcasts today?
Oh, yeah. I have a 90-minute commute, 45 minutes each way, so yeah, I got some time in there to fill. So
which ones are you listening to today?
Pretty much always catch Don and Drew still, since Drew's a friend of mine, and I know them and kind of help them get started and stuff. I think I'm trying to get Delta Park Project each time they get one out, because I find that pretty funny.
Yeah, I had Jason on here about a month ago.
Yeah, I did hear that one. I do like Geek Fu Action Grip.
Mighty Mur.
Yeah,
I love Murs. I didn't listen to it this weekend. I saw my iPod. Matter of fact, I'm going to listen to it tonight.
Yeah, I'm still, let's see, I try to hit Tiny Podcast, Brainwagon Radio every now and then. There's probably a couple more I'm forgetting, but I think it's a lot of the ones I kind of got into early on. It's hard to kind of get into the habit of looking for new ones all the time, because there's just so many now. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to check out some new ones every now and then.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Drew's your friend, and Drew. I talked with Drew and had them on here, and Drew said, "Oh, you need to talk to Pete. He's the one that got me into this." and then I'm listening to your podcast, and I found the irony was that late in August last year, you kind of gave Adam and Dave Schlusher some grief about being blue in their podcast, and then you basically get Dawn and Drew out into the podcasting world that makes Adam and Dave look like Father Roderick.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and the whole being blue thing, which using that term first of all just makes me laugh, because so many young people don't know what it means. I mean, that was half joking. The whole if you can tell from listening to my stuff, it was all kind of trying to be funny, at least trying to be. So again, it was just I was listening to those guys at the time, and at the time too, it was kind of like, you could listen to those guys and hopefully listen to mine a day or two later, and you'd actually get the joke if you had heard them talking. So, I mean, you can't really do that today because there's just so many, and you can fall behind easily. But that's kind of how it was at that time, at that point in time. And Dawn and Drew, yeah, I think they're probably not safe for work. I would assume. Depending on where
it depends. Yeah, I mean, if you work at a strip club,
in a porn shop, sex shop, that's fine. No problem. Some sort of 3D pornographic movie theater.
Or if you work with Jim Baker, I guess it'd be.
Oh yeah, yes.
On September 8th, there was one podcast you talked about and correctly predicted podcasting's growth, although you called it audio blogging. You also predicted your lack of involvement in it.
What did I say?
You said that you felt that this was going to be tremendous growth, and when this happens, that you won't be there involved in it, that you'll kind of just be on the sidelines.
Yeah, it kind of sums up how I work.
Why was it that you were able to see this before pretty much almost anybody else? You were involved with it, anyone else, but you decided just kind of just sit on the sidelines.
It's not that I really, it's not that I make a conscious effort. It's like Don and Drew, they got really into podcasting, and people get really into things, but I think I figured out my thing that I get really into is like getting into things.
One of the reasons I wanted to interview you was to find out, what do you see going forward? What are some of the things that you're interested in now, so that the VCs know where to put their money?
Yeah, and they won't set it my way though. So why should I tell anybody? I got that question last week too, and I hate that question because I feel like whatever I'll say, I'll jinx it. It won't happen. I mean, I think right now, podcasting definitely took off. I think the video thing, as in like video blogging or vlogging, is going to be pretty big, probably within, I'm going to say this year for sure, or if not, very early next year. Especially with the rumors we're hearing about this video iPod type device.
I noticed that most of your podcasts run 1 to 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Lately, it looks like you've been posting once a month.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any increase in your posts coming up in the future?
No idea. It's that, it's the whole thing of like, I don't want to be a slave to it. I don't want to feel like I have to do it.
I'm going to go back to another one of your quotes from August 31st, and it was about making money with podcasting, or in that case, you said audio blog, and you said, 3 steps. Create the audio blog /podcast, question mark for step 2. Step 3 was profit. That hasn't changed either.
No,
11 months later, it's still the same 3 steps.
Well, it's not like that's exactly original. I didn't exactly come up with that. I think it's been used before. Slight difference, But, it's funny. I mean, it was funny, really, seeing it go from a bunch of people on a Yahoo group, just kicking ideas around, to like businesses trying to form around it and things like that. Very interesting to see it grow in the last year. And are people making money at it? I'm sure some are, right? Aren't they?
Well, as near as I know so far, Dawn and Drew haven't made any money from it. We're talking with them, CC, Chapman, and none of the people in Pod Show haven't gotten paid anything.
Don and Drew, I hear, are getting, P.O. boxes full of stuff every day. But
Oh, yeah, they get a lot of good stuff from Fox and other adult places.
Yeah. I think, too, like in the early days of, last September or whatever, the people who were into it were the people who, were into it for, their own reasons of, no one thought about making money at it at first, I don't think. It was just, having fun with it, or this is a great idea, let's see where it goes. I have a great skill for not being able to make money at things. I do have a job and I actually get paid, which is good, because I can't really turn ideas like podcasting or whatever into money for some reasons.
Going forward, then, you're seeing video as something that you're thinking is the next wave. What are you doing? What's your involvement on video right now? Or video casting, or vcasting, or vlogging, or vlogging?
Yeah.
And, people complain that podcasting is not the great name. I said, but at least it's a name. Yeah,
that's the thing. We need it. As soon as we settle on the name, it'll explode. Now, there's I looked at freevlog.org, which is freevlog.org, and they kind of have this nice little tutorial on how to be a video blogger, what to do. I think it's going to get big. So I figured, well, let's give it a shot and see what it's all about.
Yeah, I flipped through and I watched some videocasts now. I'm starting to watch more. I watched Spreading the Pink the other day. I thought that was pretty funny. I don't know if you've seen them. They're an unusual couple.
I think I read about that one. I didn't grab it yet.
Yeah, they got.
I was out of town last week, so I'm behind on everything.
Bright pink hair, and I won't go into much detail, but it was definitely different. It was not Rocket Boom. Let's put it that way.
Right.
There are quite a few interesting oones out there, and I'm starting to look at them and see what people are doing. I found that if it's an hour to do a podcast, it's 5 hours to do a video cast.
Yeah. Well, again, it's pretty much I'm doing something really similar where I'm keeping my videos down to 2 minutes or something. So my editing, it's not 5 hours editing for me.
How are you encoding? What way did you decide to encode? Because that's another thing right now. At least with podcasts, everybody agrees MP3.
Yeah.
I don't see that agreement in the video casting side.
Yeah, you don't, and that is an issue. I kind of just looked at what Freevlog said. I first started experimenting with video months and months back. It's like, well, I should do everything as like MP4 or an MPEG or something, because that's pretty universal. And I just from reading the mailing list and looking at the free vlog site and reading up, people are like, oh yeah, I just use QuickTime, use a movie file, and use MPEG-4 encoding, and QuickTime's available for Windows and Mac, and a friend of mine even got it running on Linux. Okay, like everyone can see it. I'm like, well, and I am pretty anti-proprietary, format type thing, but I'm like, well, that's what they're doing. It seems to work. So I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm using now. It's just QuickTime movies that are MPEG-4 encoded.
And that's my thought, was that I wanted to go with that. I was like, look, if it can play in QuickTime, to me, that was the way to go. Did you want to talk at all about your podcast, about what it is?
What I tried to do really was, at the time, well, it's kind of funny. There's like there's a little bit of reasoning behind it. And everyone was kind of getting into this format of like, start recording and just start talking, and after an hour when you're tired, stop. I was kind of like, and that's great, but like I said, I drive 90 minutes a day. I can only hear so many different things. So part of my idea was like the short form audio. I wanted to see just a million different small short things that I could kind of mix up into like a full hour, maybe 30 different podcasts for an hour. And I don't know how it is today, but it seems like there's a whole lot of these like shows, where it's like they do, once or twice a week or whatever, and it's 40 minutes, and they have the set time or 30 minutes or whatever. But I kind of like the whole just get in there, do it quick, get out kind of thing. Early on, I said like, it'd be perfect for like a joke a day kind of thing, just like some, quick little story every day, something amusing. And there are some shorter ones. I mean, there's some that are like, 5 or 10 minutes, but. Oh, and part two of it was like, oh my gosh, we had to worry about all these like bandwidth things. What if you get 50,000 subscribers to your podcast? Your bandwidth will go through the roof. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to keep all mine small. How can I do that? Keep them short. Keep it short because I can't afford to have them long because of the bandwidth costs. And, keep it short because I want it short because I want other people to do it short, and then I can hear more stuff. Like in the weblogging world, it's pretty easy to link to someone. They can link to you. You can reference and quote them.
Yeah, cross-promotion has been, a lot of podcasters have jumped on board on that and found that it's a good way to get an audience. The question comes down to, is the entire audience of podcasters just other podcasters? And that's the $1 million question.
Well, you know what? I think every new medium kind of starts that way. I mean, it was, like I said, like in 1997, for weblogging, where there were like 20 people and we all read each other's weblogs, and that was it, And now there's millions and millions, and hopefully there's twice as many people reading them. I don't know, but it's okay if there isn't. I'm fine with that. I'm kind of a proponent of everyone making media, and not everyone's going to do it, but if there's 100 million blogs and there's 100 million and one people who read blogs, I'm okay with that. Or whatever the numbers are. So if it's just podcasters listening to podcasts, I'm fine with that. That doesn't really bother. I'm not out to get a wider audience, I'm out to have an audience that enjoys it and is into it. I mean, to some degree, that's probably how the video blogging group, I think there's like 1,000 members now, and, the number that actually posts is probably, under 200, and the number that actually, creates videos every week or every 2 weeks is, it's probably half that.
Yeah, I saw they actually did, on one of the recent posts, they actually said there's
150 or something.
150. Yeah, what it was, right under 150 people that post on a regular basis, that at least 2 posts or something. And I'm like, maybe I've posted twice in the last month, maybe.
Yeah. Like I said, I kind of feel like I was there when it when it kind of started and helped kick things off. And I don't know, I kind of feel like I don't have anything to contribute anymore. So I kind of stepped out of it a bit.
Where can people find your podcast and website?
Well, RasterWeb.net would be my home in cyberspace. There's a weblog there, which has been running since 1997, and the audio section, which is RasterWeb Audio, doesn't use the word podcast because it didn't exist last year. But you can just click on audio, you'll get there, and there's a feed, and subscribe to it, or don't, whatever. You see how good I am at self-promotion. It's just whatever.
Stop! I got I'm gonna have to edit this all out. You're going overboard here, Pete. I mean, I have limits here. I got some ethics I got to watch out for.
Yeah, well, I know there's all these different like networks nowadays, podcasting networks. There's the sci-fi group. There's the tech podcasts. So I'm basically starting the the apathetic podcaster group, where people who just don't really care enough to do anything about it.
So you're going to continue doing this?
Yeah, I'm sure. That's the nice thing too. Is like subscribe to the feed, which I guess a lot of people do because it's a big percentage of the stats every month. It might take a month, might take 2 months, but at some point something will come down the pipe and you'll get it.
Okay, well, I look forward to that. I guess you call it Easter egg coming into iTunes once a month or so.
Yeah, Easter might be the next time I do it. No, I don't say you look forward to it because you're putting the pressure on me. I have to actually do something now.
I always end this interviews with, what advice would you like to offer to those starting a podcast today?
I want to say do something different, but some people just can't think of it. Have fun with it. And if you don't have fun with it, don't do it. I'd say, don't step into it thinking, you're going to be a celebrity, you're going to be rich. Just mainly why I do things is to have fun or to learn, or just, I have to have some sort of enjoyment out of it. So I guess I'd say enjoy it or quit doing it.
For every Dawn and Drew, there's going to be 1,000 My Pods forecast that just aren't going to be around. And not to pick on them, but I'll pick on them because they faded and I like their podcast. But the fact is, not every show, you can't come into this expecting to be a celebrity. It's not going to happen. Well, Pete, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, folks, that concludes our interview with Pete from RasterWeb Radio. Thanks again, Pete, for coming on the show. I recommend you check out his podcast at RasterWeb.net. Now, coming up at the end of today's show, we'll be playing a promo from the Life with Jim podcast. And on our next show, our guest will be Chuck Tomasi from the Chuck Chat podcast. So please come back and check that out and stick around at the end for the Life with Jim promo. Well, that's going to do it for us today. As always, this is your host, Rob, reminding you to listen different with Podcast 411.
Hey, this is Jim from the Life with Jim podcast.
Oh, come on, Dad, you're kidding me.
A podcast for everyone. I'll talk about our everyday life. I'll talk about Xbox gaming, photography, video and computers. I may do a skit or play around with some music. I just might have my family on as guests just to make it interesting.
I gotta go potty.
You can listen with Apple's iTunes. Just search for Life with Jim. You can also go to my website at lifewithjim.net to listen. You'll find show notes, photos, video, and even post comments for each episode.
Go on, Dad, we gotta go to football practice.
Can you turn that music down?
Listen to Life with Jim, a podcast for everyone.